Welcome back to Living Laughlin. You are joining us on the third episode of Mojave Leader Lounge. And we are so excited that today we have the owner of the journal here, Shirin McGraham. And she also is an author of Bullhead City, which we're going to talk about a little bit later on. So without further ado, we're going to get into our questions. So Shirin, so tell me about just a little bit about how you came to Bullhead City. Where'd you come from?
I grew up in New York on Long Island and spent my summers in Michigan with my mother's family, and moved to Michigan and started college when I was 17. And my first thing I did was take a journalism class, and that kind of set my life
forever
on this track where I am now. And I've done a lot of different things in my life, but I look back now and it looks like it's all part of the same mosaic because it all fits together.
Isn't it funny how that works out?
It is. It's when I was younger, I couldn't see a pattern in my life. I would try to do my resume and it would look like the resume of a crazy person because I had all these different jobs. But now I look back and everything contributed. So I went to college and I majored in English and minored in journalism, and had to drop out when I got married and had my son, and then finished up as a single mom, worked my way through, finally graduating from UCLA, and I lived in California. I was a school teacher for a while, and
wow.
Then I got married to an entertainment attorney in Hollywood, and he said, stay home and do what you want. So I was writing a novel, and I was trying to write screenplays, and I took dance lessons, and one thing led to another, and I ended up becoming a dancer. I was a belly dancer in Hollywood, and I took my first dance lesson when I was 30.
Oh my goodness.
And I danced until I was 45. And then I thought I better quit while I was ahead. So I got a job as a restaurant publicist. I had been writing the whole time, and I was writing for small newspapers in Los Angeles. And I had experience in restaurants working my way through college. So the two things, the writing skill and the restaurant, and I loved food and cooking. And so I used to write restaurant reviews. So it all kind of came together, and I was doing that for a long time. And then I decided to move up to Big Bear and start a bed and breakfast. And
oh my gosh.
I was up there for about 8 years. And the whole time I was up there, I was also one of the planning commissioners. So I was when I was a kid, I was interested in becoming an architect too. So that kind of all fit in.
Oh my goodness.
I loved being a planning commissioner up there. It was really interesting to there were a lot of developers trying to pave over Paradise and put up a parking lot and, things like that. So I was known as the tree hugger among all of the locals up there. So, but anyway, I was there, and my good friend from college, from my early days of college, was a journalist, and he had moved here and started the Bullhead City Bee. And I was leaving Big Bear and didn't know what I was doing, and he said, why don't you come here and work on the paper? So that's how I got here.
What year was that?
2000.
2000, okay.
And then we started the journal together.
Okay. And the Bullhead Bee, that was
the Bullhead City Bee.
That was a newspaper.
That was a weekly newspaper, and he and his late fiance and a friend of his, the three of them started it, I think, in 1990.
Okay.
Or the end of 1989. By the time I came along, it had been in existence for a while. And we did the Bee every week. And so we had the Bee until 2018, and then we closed it down. And then we just worked on the journal because that was doing very, very well.
Yeah.
And it was a free newspaper, and the Bee was only 25 cents. But it just wasn't, it was strange to me because we're the same minds that conceived the journal and the Bee, but the journal was wildly popular and the Bee was
yeah.
So we just shut it down. So we continued on, and we celebrated the 25 years in March of this year.
Wow. And so the journal, I mean, I see it all over the place.
Yeah.
It's in all the restaurants. It's in all, I mean, most of the small businesses have it, right?
Right.
And so the journal comes out once a month?
Once a month, and we distribute to Kingman, Havasu, Laughlin, Needles, Bullhead City, Fort Mojave, Mojave Valley, and everything in between.
So you started the journal
in March of 2000.
In March of 2000. And just for everybody, this is what the journal looks like. It's distributed in, I mean, virtually every small business has it. And they're just great stories in it. It's still wildly popular. And it's free. So a lot of people grab them in the restaurants and whatnot here. I mean, it's really, really, really a popular paper. So how do you pick the topics and the stories that go into the journal?
I read all the papers I can find. I watch various news stations on TV. I go through the computer. I'm looking for news stories all month long. And every time something appeals to me, I write it down and as much information as I can find out about it, and then do some research. And we do use artificial intelligence to do our research, and I have an associate.
Isn't it the best thing ever?
It is. It's really amazing. It's a little redundant sometimes.
Yeah.
So you have to read it through and weed out stuff and fact check it whenever possible, because they're not always totally accurate.
Right.
But it's a wonderful tool.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, I remember the days of Dewey Decimal System in the library and research books that you couldn't take home, and then we got to the computer stage of our lives and we can research almost anything, Google anything up, but then this is a big help too.
This is unbelievable.
I mean, I work with a young man who is my assistant. I hired him to do my web page, and he's Jeremy Webb, and he has some journalism experience, so it's just the two of us working on the paper now. My husband passed away in 2023, and I was doing it. He had suffered from Alzheimer's, so I was kind of doing the paper by myself for several years before he finally passed from liver cancer. And Jeremy came to work with me, and so with the ability to use artificial intelligence to do the research and the background checking, and so much time is saved. When we had the bee, we had 3 or 4 employees at one time. And then we had people doing, that doesn't include the distributors. That's just people in the office working on the papers. And now it's just the two of us. You. And he works from his home and I work from my home.
And so you're just out looking to see what's in the news, then you just prioritize
and then
what you think?
As a newspaper entity, we get press releases from people.
Okay.
Like the major companies like MCC and MEC.
Oh, sure.
Everybody that has a large corporation and the educational, the school system, they send out press releases. And so we use, and the cities have promotion and publicity departments that send us stuff.
So I'm looking at the April of 2025 newsletter, and it shows that we have historic tribal water rights settlement, rights settlement poised to reshape Arizona's future. So, how did you come across that?
I don't remember.
Okay, I'm just interesting because it's
I think I saw that on the evening news, and then we researched it.
Oh, and this is another one. State land auction looms for Bullhead City's ambitious Emerald Bay development. What can you tell us about that?
That was generated by a press release from the city of Bullhead City.
Okay.
And that set us off on that one.
I gotcha.
So we get them from various places, and
that's huge. That's people are following that, and there's all kinds of roadblocks that have been put into place, and
it's going to be very interesting.
Overcome it.
This is going to be a very interesting place.
Yes.
In the future.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about really high end.
Yes.
Homes that they're talking about. So that is so cool. How do you, so I was going to ask you, how do you research and verify information, but you just had already answered that question, that you do a lot of AI, and then where you can, I'm guessing you reach out to resources.
We call people up and But we have resources. We know people in the community, so we can call them and interview them on the phone or ask for their opinion. Or it's just, I don't know, it's a way of life.
Yeah.
So it's hard to.
Do you have people ever call you or text you and say, hey, you got to cover this, there's something going on?
Yes.
Okay.
But the interesting thing is a lot of people do not understand the difference between a paper like the
Monthly.
Journal, that's a monthly paper that's for free, as opposed to a weekly or a daily newspaper, which has to report on everything that's happening.
Right.
Crime, automobile accidents, sports, all kinds of things that are happening in the community. Whereas our focus with the Journal is basically economic development. What's driving the economy in this area? And almost anything can fit in. I mean, we have a section for business. We have a section for home improvement. We have a section for leisure and entertainment. And we have an op-ed section. That's kind of my fun. I like that the best. Yeah, I really enjoy some of the political cartoons, although I take a lot of heat from people sometimes. They don't agree, but
got to be careful.
Well, when we had the Bee, my husband and I had different political views. So it was always kind of interesting that we would fight over what was going to go in the op-ed page, because that's opinion. If it's factual, if it's news, there's no problem, because news is what is going on. It is.
Yeah.
But when it's an opinion and it's an editorial or an editorial cartoon, then we would always have to, like, if he had something that he wanted in, I had to put something that I wanted in. So now I have to imagine he's still here, and I have to make sure I'm very fair. I try to be fair. I always try to put in everything so that it's balanced.
Have you ever had any challenges? I mean, first off, I'm super glad that you were talking about the difference between a monthly paper and a daily or weekly paper, because truly, like, the daily and weekly is all about, like, what's happening on the street, where you're more about, okay, what's happening economically, like more macro, where the daily papers are more micro, right?
That's a very good. I like that, yeah.
And so I mean, I love that, because that was one of my questions too. But the other thing is that I would think that there might be, with all this conversation that we just had about politics and whatnot, there might be some challenges doing a paper in a small town. Like, do you take heat, or have you ever?
Yes, I do. I take a lot more heat than my husband did, because he was a very staunch conservative Republican, and I'm a moderate Democrat. So I have to, and I'm in the minority in this community.
For sure, yeah.
I am. So I have to be very careful, and I try to be fair.
Yeah.
But once in a while, I have to put in both sides,
Yeah.
And some people don't like that. Even if there's stuff on the other side, they still take offense.
So how do you handle it? Do you think that you change what you publish because of your political views?
I think I have moderated it a bit.
Okay.
Because it's one thing
You're playing to your audience.
I'm not really playing to the audience, but you don't want to offend your readership.
Right.
So if I feel like I'm trying to preach to them, or I'm trying to present my opinions, then I don't do it.
Yeah.
I just stop.
Got you.
And if I don't stop myself, Jeremy stops me.
And is Jeremy similar or different?
No, he's got a different opinion than I do.
And that's great. I think that's very healthy.
Yeah, I do too. It balances it all out. So if I get a little carried away, he'll go, and I do the same to him. If he starts putting stuff in, I'll say, wait a minute. So I think it's a good mix.
I think so too. I think that you kind of need to have a little bit of both.
Yeah, you can't just have a person or people with one mindset if you want to be fair to your readers.
Right. I think that that's some of the problem that we have in the media today, regardless of what side you're on. We have the very liberal side and the very conservative side, and there's kind of nothing in between anymore.
I know.
It's all gone.
I was raised in the era of Edward R. Murrow and the great, journalists that were very, not conservative, they were very fair, that you almost couldn't tell what their opinions were. And that when you're reporting the news, that's what it should be like. People should not be able to see what your opinion is.
Right.
And then everything changed. Back in the 80s or so, I think it started changing. And now I think journalism is in a very dangerous state. It was originally, when our founders founded this country, they respected journalism, particularly Benjamin Franklin. He was the one that instituted lower postage rates for mailing newspapers, and it's been in effect ever since. And that's because he wanted the public to be able to have accessible, he wanted them to have access to the news at an affordable price. He didn't want it to be a commodity, which is what it's becoming today. Now when you have paywalls and the newspapers are all digital, people have to pay for the commodity. And when they're paying someone, those with the most money can afford the best news. And what's going to happen to the people that can't afford that? They're at the mercy of bloggers and people who have maybe not so good motives, and they have no training and no integrity, and there's misinformation out there purposely. And,
for sure,
And so it's not journalism. It's not fair. It's not unbiased. So I think in this day and age, and particularly when the media is being considered fake, and they're cutting,
and it's both sides. Like you can't
on both
really
sides, yes.
This is not like a Democrat versus Republican or conservative. It's like they spin it the way they want to spin it.
It's the extreme people in both parties, or in all of the parties that are doing these kinds of things. And I don't know what's going to happen to journalism.
So I guess that my biggest question is, how do you feel about freedom of the press? And do you think that there still is freedom of the press? Like we're talking about how there's a bias kind of on both sides, and a lot of people are fed the news of whichever side they're listening to. So, I mean, is there freedom of the press?
I think there is freedom of the press. There have been dark periods in our country's history where there were periods when freedom of the press sort of went out the window, like the McCarthy hearings, and a lot of suppression of the news during World War II.
Yes.
And the Korean War and the Cold War, and all kinds of suppression has gone on, even, in the midst of wonderful journalism at the same time. There's always been some suppression, but I think it will survive because there's a hunger in human beings for knowledge and to know the truth. I think people all hunger after the truth, and that will keep it alive. But it's in grave danger.
And it's, I mean, like when I'm thinking about freedom of the press, I'm thinking about like somebody that has to step out there and maybe say something that's not as popular as other people want to hear. Or, I mean, even sometimes putting your life on the line because you're exposing something. I mean, back then, can you imagine those journalists going up against the president of the United States?
Yes.
It's like, you really have to sometimes put your life on the line. And I'm not sure. I feel like that where we're at with journalism right now, it feels a little bit bought and paid for, And so hopefully that's what I'm worried about.
Yes. They call journalism the fourth estate for a reason. And that's because journalism and freedom of the press keeps the powerful accountable.
Exactly right.
And we need journalism, even if you don't agree all the time with everything you read in your newspaper. If you have I think we have some good journalism in this area now. And I think that if you don't like everything in it, that's good.
That's a good thing.
Because
it should get you thinking, right?
Yes, you need to be stimulated. You need to, have things to think about and different points of view. So I think it will survive. Maybe it will have to hide for a while. I know that newspapers are a dying breed, kind of, but they're not dying in Europe. A lot of Europeans really like their newspapers.
You're talking about like the actual paper.
The actual paper.
There's digital newspapers.
Yes.
That are pretty popular.
Well, there's a problem with digital because it can be
manipulated.
It can be manipulated, and the plug can be pulled very easily.
Oh.
If you have a printed newspaper and you have a regime that does not like the news, they have to go to where the news is printed if they can find it and close the printing presses down.
That's a very good
if
point.
it's digital, they have a kill switch and it's gone.
I think my generation's is the last to kind of understand that you need to have freedom of the press to cover stuff that, especially, and again, it doesn't matter what your political affiliation is, any political person can be corrupt. And the press is supposed to keep that on its toes, you know?
Yes,
So,
and in other countries, like in Asia and in India and some other countries, literacy is growing. People are becoming more literate, and they don't have the infrastructure in some of the poorer sections. So newspapers are their source of information for large segments of the population. So it is still an important factor.
Definitely. I think it's beautiful that we're talking about that. I mean, because it just doesn't get talked about very often. So how do you balance? Like, does it drive you crazy, your personal bias sometimes with what you're publishing? It doesn't. No,
I've lived here for so long. I'm used to having to really be careful of, not offending my friends.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody I know has a different political viewpoint than I do, just about. So
it's a beautiful thing to bring in some diversity, though.
Yeah.
It's good for everybody, right?
But I have also become more conservative, like I said, as I get older.
Because it's been beat into you.
Not really, but I'm exposed to it constantly, and I'm exposed to other points of view. I was raised in New York in a radical area, and then when I went to college, I started in a small community college where the SDS had its foundation.
Wow. Okay.
I feel like the female Forrest Gump. All my life I've moved along being aware of things and situations, but not being a part of it.
That is the best movie.
I know.
That's a great analogy. You have quite a diverse background.
Yes.
I mean, wow.
I mean, when I was dancing, I was friends with Sirhan's brother and met his mother. When I was a student, like I said, I was in journalism class and we were working on the college newspaper, and some of the people I worked with were the early founders of the SDS, which is, for those who don't know, that was a group that kidnapped Patty Hearst, who was heir to the Hearst fortune, which was a newspaper, interestingly. So it's sort of gone like
wow.
that. So.
Wow. Do you in your covering off on stories, what do you see happening for Bullhead City? Like, are there trends or anything that you see happening?
I've seen the same trends over and over again. We go through a period of boom, and there's a lot of speculation about building new houses and building things and malls. Yeah. And then there's a period of retraction, and the malls are half empty, and the housing doesn't get filled, and then it comes back again. I've seen this go on over and over again. But I think I don't have good news in my mind. I mean, I hope this place really booms, but I think water is going to be our biggest problem. Yeah. There isn't enough sustainable water to take all of this population. Phoenix is getting to the point where they really can't grow. And all the surrounding towns that are part of the Phoenix metro area, it's going to happen here too. We have to share the Colorado River with other people, and California gets a big. We're kind of the last. Yes. Tribals so first. I don't Arizona, know what that will. California, Nevada, then Arizona. What that will mean to the Emerald Bay project. But I think all of the projects around here are going to be impacted by the need for water. For sure. And it's going to happen all over the United States. And we have more extreme weather now, more heat. Yeah. So I'm always confused because I'm from Minnesota and we have plenty of water. Are you fresh water because you're from Minnesota, or? No, we have plenty of fresh water in Minnesota. I know. And I always am confused as how can we pipe like oil from one country to another, but we can't pipe fresh water. I'm always confused about that, but. That's a good point. Being from Michigan, and you had a lot of water there too. A lot of water there also, but I'm kind of glad they can't. Otherwise, the Great Lakes would be the Little Lakes. Yeah, it could be. Every year, it's like there's a lot of flooding in like from the rivers, like Mississippi and the St. Croix and all that. Every year, it's flooding.
So it's like maybe certain parts of the year you can suck the extra water out. I don't know. See, I'm dumb. I'm just come up with silly stuff. Well, where can we get the journal?
You can get it at
pretty much
grocery stores.
Oh, even grocery stores.
Well, most of them. We deliver to Smith's in Fort Mojave and now in Bullhead City.
Cool.
We just started delivering there in Bullhead City. And
Black Mountain Valley Realty, you can pick it up at Black Mountain Valley Realty.
Yeah, you can pick it up almost anywhere. Banks, a lot of the bank lobbies have journals in them, hospital lobbies.
And I know restaurants, pretty much all the restaurants, like the Bonanza and the
any place people gather. We're trying now to put papers more in larger venues, like so that people, if there's a whole bunch of shops around a hospital, for instance, instead of going to every medical shop, we'll just put it in the hospital and a couple of the big clinics.
That's a great idea.
Because that way we can leave more papers for more people to have access to. Yeah.
I got to tell you, I've been, ever since I came here, so I came here in, we bought our first house in 08 and then our second house in 13, but we actually came out here at the end of 14 and I have been reading the journal. That was like one of the first things that I started reading because it had like real information about what was going on in the community, and that's kind of what sparks me up. So I would seek it out. So
thank you.
And now I actually know who
I am very proud
actually
of it.
did all the writing of it. It's so
but
cool.
I am planning on retiring.
You can.
I have to. I've been working since I was 16, and I've only had like maybe 3 years in my whole life where I didn't have to work. So I'm, looking forward to retiring. And I'm looking for a buyer, and I'm looking for someone who is a journalist.
Yeah.
Someone or people that is a journalistic group that will carry it on and not let it just die.
So if there's anybody out there that is interested, you need to contact Shirine. So you can call me and I'll get you connected.
And on page 5, we have our phone number and our website.
Well, let's give that. Do you know it by heart?
And also
page 5
on the front of our paper, it's there.
So I don't know if you can see this. So if you're interested, like I said, this is a really cool paper and it's really all over the place. So if you're interested in taking this on, I mean, that is what a great thing that it's already been started and distributed and everybody knows about it. And so Shirine is really wanting to ride off into the sunset. And if you want to take over, 928-577-2540, or the website is mojavejournal.com. mojavejournal.com with an H. So wow. Yeah. Okay, well, maybe you can retire someday.
Well, someday. I don't want to die at my desk.
Well, I don't want to wrap up yet because we have this cool book. So it's Images of America, and they do like a bunch of different books all over the country. Mm-hmm. And Shirine actually wrote this one. And I love it because I give it to all my buyers. So it's got a lot of history, a whole bunch of really cool old pictures, just the whole history of Bullhead. Why don't you tell us about what's in the book?
Well, this is a part of a series called Images of America. And they started out as a company that was printing postcards from various places. And then they started talking to the local museum people or the local journalists, and they started doing stories about the towns. And they started, I think, in the East Coast or on the West Coast, not on the East Coast. And then they worked their way west. And by the time they got to Arizona, it was 2015. And because I was the editor of the Bullhead City Bee, they called up and asked if I would like to write a book about Bullhead City. And since I was a writer, I said, okay. And it took me 18 months because there was nothing out.
Yeah, right.
There was nothing at that point. I mean, there were a couple of newsletters, and there was a couple of stories that were printed by people that weren't historians and they weren't writers.
Right.
They were city employees. Yep. Written about their town at Kingman or something. So I had to do a lot of research, but I had a lot of help along the way. I worked with people from the Bullhead City Museum, which is the Colorado River Historical Society, and I worked with the Needles Museum and the Kingman Museum.
Wow.
And an early journalist that came to this area was a fellow named Larry, and he had a bunch of material. He started Larry Ford, he started the Needles Star back in the day, and so I tapped his brains, and I talked to a lot of people, and I found some of the pictures nobody had ever seen before.
Yeah.
And my husband sort of indicated he wanted to write it with me, but we were very competitive, and so he started telling me what to do, and I said, no, I think I'll do this by myself. And he said, but I'm the historian and I have the pictures. And I said, well, I'll find my own. And when I found them,
this is your husband.
Yes, we knew each other since the time we were 20 or something. I found all the pictures in here were things that I found stuck behind other pictures in the museum, the old museum in Bullhead and stuff.
Yeah.
And
but it was by Davis Dam at the time.
Yes, the one that was in the old Catholic Church. And so a lot of the pictures he had not seen, and this one was hanging up in a corner. And this is Mulholland coming to the Colorado River looking for a source of water for California. If you ever saw it.
And that's where it all started.
That's where it all started.
That's when we started giving our water away to California.
Yes, and he here is on a ferry crossing the Colorado with an old Model T.
Wow.
And that picture most people had not seen. But anyway, when he finished reading it, I didn't let him see it until it was finished. And he looked at me and he said, "Did you write this?" And I said, "Well, thanks a lot."
Competitive.
We were very competitive. But anyway, it turned out that it was, surprisingly to me, it was a bestseller in the printing world of Images of America. They have thousands of books out, and for I think about 3 or 4 years or more, it was just a bestseller among this whole area.
Well, I know.
And I didn't think that many people would be interested in reading a book called Bullhead City, but
I love it. And I just like to know about, the place that I live. So that's me. I'm not like a historian, but I'm just interested. Like I'm inquisitive. So you can get it on Amazon.
Yes, you can get it on Amazon.
They also have it at Walgreens.
But
I clean
every
them
time
out.
I was going to say, every time I go there, my books are gone. There's a rumor that there's a realtor going around buying up all the books. I'll have to ask them to stock more, but you can get it on Amazon.
I did get them on
Barnes
Amazon.
and Noble. You can just write directly to the company, the Images of America.
It's super
Arcadia
easy.
Press.
It's super easy to go on Amazon and get them too.
Because Bullhead City has a very, very rich history. Not only the Native American aspect, which was incredible. They had Spirit Mountain, which a lot of people don't know.
Oh my gosh, cool.
I had a friend who read the book, and she said, "Oh, I thought Spirit Mountain was a casino." I said, "It is, but it's also
they named a mountain after it."
There's also a mountain that's very spiritual. So it has that aspect.
And it's so cool.
And there used to be a fort, an actual fort in Fort Mojave, and the ruins are still there.
Really?
And they used that, and they don't know. They used to take tours. The Mojaves would have a tours and take you there, and I've been to that. There's also a petroglyph called the Twins, which is in Fort Mojave, which is oh
my God! Clearly, I have to read
it.
Yeah.
Yes. And there's also a place called the Mystic Maze, which is in between Havasu and Needles, which is off the I-40, which was hundreds of acres of furrows where the Native Americans would go to cleanse themselves after warfare or before returning back to their people, or they would just do it as a spiritual practice. And part of it was destroyed when the railroad came through.
Yeah.
And then when I-40 came through, more of it was destroyed. But you can still see a lot of it if you get off the exit and I can't remember what the name of the exit is. It's where that resort is.
I think it's a J, right? Is it J?
No. It's between Needles and Havasu.
Oh,
It's almost halfway between.
okay. Topak, Pirates Cove.
Pirates Cove. That's the exit. When the signage directs you towards Pirates Cove, go in the opposite direction, and you'll see a very weathered, almost illegible sign sticking up out of the ground. And if you go there and look, you will see these rows and rows of rock.
Wow.
Thousands of years ago.
That's so cool. So you guys got to get this. You got to get the
And another thing is that the
book is
during
so
World
cool.
War II, Patton trained his troops in the desert right outside of Bullhead City in Laughlin, and it was the largest training camp ever in the country up until that point, and I think even until today.
Wow.
So there's a lot of history.
And
there.
how fun to put the book together, really.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
it was
really a lot of fun. And it's amazing. So everybody needs to get a copy of it. And I give it to every single one of my buyers. I love it.
That means everybody has to buy a house from you.
All right. Well, I am so happy that you came and did this today.
It's a pleasure to talk to you.
I can't believe how, I mean, you are just so, you're so well-rounded. It's crazy. Like how much experience you have. And I just learned a lot about you today. And I really appreciate that you came.
Thank you. I really appreciate being asked to do this.
So our episode 3 is over. Stay tuned for episode 4. We'll have even more cool people in the Mojave Leader Lounge. So thanks for joining us, guys.